And hello everyone, and welcome to your Cowboy radio broadcast. Drop the weight and pulling up, for it's been another crazy week, and we're seeing the United States push itself even further into its current decline. With the polar vortex making its way down to Texas and taking out a good portion of their electrical grid, it's now reported that up to 70 people have died due to hypothermia. This is a tragedy unto itself, and with power just getting back online, we're only now seeing that number start to curve off. Now, most, that provided the at-face facts of the situation, would see easily that Texas as a whole was just not prepared for a storm of this magnitude. With natural gas lines freezing, as well as the many wind turbines around the state, homes with electric heaters were plunged into the below 20 temperature range. This led to pipes bursting around the state, limiting water availability and forcing the state to ask residents to limit water use. All this, of course, has caused many to question who or what is to blame. Some are pointing the finger at Ted Cruz, who took a trip to Cancun with his family at the start of the storm. Poor optics to be sure, while others are saying the infrastructure itself would be to blame, such as the freezing turbines and the many residences that rely on electricity for heat. What makes the situation particularly troubling is the fact that Texas has evolved into a political swing state, causing just about every political activist group to mobilize on the situation. So now, on top of the catastrophic natural disaster, we have a political shitstorm brewing around the problem. What Texas needs right now is not a pretentious applause from people who believe their politicians are somehow less corrupt, but rather a helping hand to get them back on their feet to address the root of these failures to avoid any similar circumstances in the future. We need to be uplifting each other as Americans if we are to navigate around the current global stage. To do this, though, we must acknowledge our own internal failures before we can start addressing the externals. This could be applied as far down as to the individual or as high as the entirety of the state. If you cannot address the workings of your own locale, then I personally recommend you withhold any real judgment from national or global events. All of this really demonstrates the real disease that permeates the mainstream: complacency. We here in these fine United States have grown quite comfortable with ourselves and our imagined victory in the world. Laziness is the usual these days, and it can be quite a challenge to find anyone motivated to do anything besides smoke, fuck, or play games. Now, this isn't to say that these things are inherently corrupt unto themselves, but rather it appears the art of balance is being forced further and further from our consciousness. And this has been quite a concern of mine, as well as I'm sure many others, because we now have a majority of people who found themselves trapped in the rapids of present society, always being compelled to buy into the newest thing of the day in search of some sort of everlasting security. The worst part about this is that those caught up in it believe themselves to be on the proper path, and those on the outside are just crazy. They're conspiracy theorists, and couldn't possibly anything more, right? This ties in because I fear now that every disaster will be swamped in a tirade of absurdism that'll prevent any progress from being made. The morals that are holding this culture together are fracturing, and this can be directly blamed on the sensationalized media forced down our throats. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to find unbiased sources, even on the more popular sites. Even YouTube, which was the king of independent content for a minute there, is falling hard as they purge their site of smaller voices, make room for the likes of CNN and Fox News. The only effective solution that comes to mind is to shift our collective attention to other places of discourse. This means abandoning the mainstream social media platforms to more open-source focused ones. Sites that will focus more on allowing the user to control what they see, rather than the other way around. Violence, of course, should be regulated, keep the conversation active, but all opinions should have a place to voice their concerns. The truth will always stand on its own, therefore an untrue narrative on its own will have no effect on its course. It's only in today's society do we see the strong arm of the global corporations and governments manipulating what gets put on the front page after spending multiple decades psychologically trapping you into their data feeds. There are many individuals working on projects of this sort, though a lot of the initiatives seem to be lacking proper funding. It'd be fantastic if someone like Elon Musk could come in and pick up the bill, considering he's always fighting with the media, though I'm not sure how likely something like that would be, considering he's juggling multiple enterprises at once. Regardless, it's only a matter of time before something like a second internet pops up. If I'm thinking correctly, I believe someone is actually already working on that. Would be worth a quick Google search anyway. To think that something won't inevitably take over the current paradigm is ridiculous. It's happened time and time again, only now just on a more rapid scale. There's a lot of new hope in technology, and with the internet it's possible for anyone to learn just about any skill from home. It's really going to come down to whether or not the average American picks up the bill. Can we hold ourselves responsible and communicate with our neighbors to solve the problems, or are we going to continue to hide in our houses, thinking our neighbors will all be against us? Hard to say which it'll be right now, because there's a lot of people taking up the fight, but an equal if not greater amount of people are falling into the culture war trap, or even worse, into complacency. Here on Cowboy Radio, the goal is to start bringing together a community that will be more effective at information collecting and reviewing than I ever could be on my own. Eventually, once we start gaining traction, a Discord can be set up and inevitably our own website to host videos and set up an open-sourced forum. I'll be able to piece together current events and set up the show to provide my own deeper analysis on connections that I'm able to make. The goal for a project like this is to provide for ourselves a solid information foundation. By that I mean safeguarding ourselves and each other so that if opposing or conflicting ideas come into our own lives or the collective, we can bring the idea before a network of spiders, and this would allow the network to be dissected and either adopted or disregarded depending on how it holds up in the present debate. Change is inevitable, and the future will keep on coming, and as far as I can see, we're in for a tidal wave of niche ways of living. As more and more people adopt lifestyles not familiar with their locality, this will challenge a lot of morals and ethics people of different regions used to hold. In the long run, I believe this could be a good thing, but the in-between lost periods we're coming into is going to be hard for a lot of people. Those that don't actively participate in the structuring of their own life are going to be swept along into the abyss with no control and no idea even of their lack of control. Essentially, yes, the Matrix, so take that as you will. In the next broadcast, we'll be going over more solutions that everyone can do in their everyday life to help fight against the machine. The real fight isn't on the Capitol steps, but in the minds and hearts of every American. So make sure you're taking care of yourself and those close around you. It's going to be a long haul, everyone. And with that, I'll wrap up this current episode. Make sure you leave a like and comment on anything you found interesting, or if you have any suggestions. Like I was saying, it's going to be a community project if it's going to have any success at all. I appreciate everyone who's decided to listen, and be sure to stay tuned for next weekend for the Vacation IRL podcast, and again next week for another Cowboy radio broadcast. Signing off for the night. Peace.